We'll call the special meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edgar?
Here.
Councilmember Gross?
Here.
Councilmember Kusamoto? Absent. Mayor Pro Tem Hasselbrink?
Here.
Mayor Murphy?
Here. Special order of the day, we're going to update the general fund revenue. Who gets the honor?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. The item before you tonight is to discuss and provide an update on the 2015-16 general fund revenues and expenditures, and also to discuss the 2016-17 proposed general fund budget. Before we start off, I wanted to also remind everyone that tonight is actually the third budget workshop on the 2016-17 budget. We kicked off the budget process in February, and where we opened up and discussed the 2016-17 general fund operating budget. And then 2 weeks ago, we discussed the capital improvement program and budget. And we've also had several meetings with the Budget Standing Committee throughout the process as well. So looking at 2015-16, we're projecting a budget surplus of approximately $79,000, which is approximately $17,000 better than what was projected in February. And we'll get into the reasons for those variances in the next couple of slides, but wanted to open up the forum as well throughout the process of this presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt at any point in time. Revenues, general fund revenues for 2015-16 are projected to be approximately $171,000 better than projected, which is largely due to building and public works permit revenue, which is about $81,000 better than projected. And that's partially offset with related contractual services. We also had an increase in charges for services revenue, which is partly related to better than projected race on the base revenues, and also better than projected aquatics related revenues. Also, we've had other fluctuations or increases in revenues. For example, in miscellaneous revenue, about $18,000 better than projected. That's largely related to reimbursements for damage to city property. For example, we received $11,000 from farmers insurance in July for damage to a city bus shelter at Catella and Saratoga. And the item that we discussed 2 weeks ago, we're still pursuing that item related to the Cerritos Bridge damage. General fund expenditures for 2015-16 were projected to be approximately $12.89 million at mid-year in February, but are now projected to be approximately $13 million, which is approximately $153,000 higher, which is largely due to a $77,000 retrospective payment, which is due to Cal JPIA. And then also, as I mentioned on the previous slide, about $43,000 more in contractual services is due to the consultant for work related to building and safety services, which is fully offset with building and permit revenue. The staff report that is included in your agenda packet also includes proposed budget adjustments to revenues and expenditures of $125,800. And so with that, that summarizes the fiscal impact for 2015-16, which, as I mentioned, is not just balanced, but provides a budget surplus of approximately $79,000 for the fiscal year. For 2016-17, in February, when we kicked off the budget process, we had a preliminary deficit of approximately $250,000. The proposed budget that's included in the agenda for today is now balanced, which maintains existing services. It also includes additional amounts paid towards PERS, which are just the required amounts required by CalPERS. And it does not use reserves to balance the budget. So as we get into the next couple of slides in terms of revenues and expenditures, I'll explain how we close the budget gap. On the revenue side, budgeted revenues are approximately 81,000 higher than we originally projected earlier in the budget process, largely due to an increase in transfers from the gas tax fund, which covers a portion of the cost of street maintenance. The amount transferred from gas tax annually is approximately 185,000, which reimburses the general fund for the general fund incurs over $500,000 in expenses in its street maintenance division. And so the transfer from the gas tax fund is an eligible expense and something that we do annually as well, and it covers a small portion of the general fund's costs related to that. Property tax revenue since 2012-13, assessed values have increased consistently year over year. In fact, they've increased about 3 to 5% annually and are projected to be approximately 2.9% higher in 2016-17. So very steady growth for the last several fiscal years. On the sales and use tax side, we've also seen very steady growth consistently since 2009-10. You'll also note on this slide, sales tax revenue is up 4% on an economic or a full accrual basis in the next year in 2016-17. However, we're actually down on a cash basis. There was a timing difference associated with the payments from the state in 2015-16, where we received a one-time true-up of $193,000 due to the wind down of the triple flip. So on the expenditure side, budgeted expenditures are approximately $170,000 lower, largely due to the projected cash savings from leaving Cal JPIA, which was partially offset with an increase in the amount that we have set aside for capital replacement for vehicles. And we've received word from Cal JPIA that they have approved the city's request that allows us, that waives the requirement that required previously 12-month noticing requirement. And so that means that we'll be allowed to exit on July 1st, and we will be bringing forward an item to the council for further discussion, and that will allow us to join another pool on July 1st. That change will allow us to save approximately $250,000. But as I mentioned, we are also increasing the amount allocated for capital replacement charges, which the original budget had 0 allotted for capital replacements. We've allotted in the current budget $70,000, which, as we discussed 2 weeks ago when we went over the capital improvement program budget and also the vehicle budget, we have about 7 vehicles that are recommended for replacement. And if we were to finance those vehicles with a capital lease over 4 years, the annual principal and interest on that financing would be approximately $70,000 per year. And so the amount included in the budget is sufficient to cover those annual lease payments. The proposed budget includes the items that are on this slide, and these are the same items that were included in the original budget that was discussed with the council in February, but just wanted to kind of recap. Salary and benefit costs increases of approximately $302,000, comprised of, within that amount, there's about $96,000 increase in PERS costs. There's a loss of vacancy savings by getting up to full staffing, which is about $122,000 cost. And then there's COLAs and other merit increases, which is about $69,000. And then photo enforcement, we're recommending that the hourly rate for photo enforcement officers be increased from $30 an hour to $35 per hour based upon a salary survey. And we'll have an item on the June 20th agenda to consider approval of that, but it's been included within the current budget that's in front of you today. There's also increases in retiree health costs, which has to do with retirements. And also there's proposed increases for non-represented employees that will also be on the June agenda for further consideration. But what's included in the current budget is a 1% increase for the city's non-represented employees, and also an increase to the health insurance contributions consistent with the amounts that are already provided to the city's miscellaneous and safety groups that are represented. And then on this slide goes back to 2008-9 and shows that every year for the past several fiscal years, year over year, operating revenues have exceeded operating expenditures. And so I think just driving home the city council and staff's commitment to providing a balanced budget without the use of reserves. And general fund reserves are projected to be approximately $7.35 million at the end of 2016-17. And so in terms of the recommendations, it's partly a receive and file in terms of the update, but also to answer any questions you might have related to the 15-16 budget or the 2016-17 proposed budget as well. And also, the other recommendation is to approve the recommended budget amendments that are mentioned in the staff report that amount to $125,800. And with that, I'll turn it over to the council.
Thank you. Jason, on this general fund bar graph in the back, it looks like this year projected we're pretty flat. And again, in 14 to 15, we were actually down just a little bit. Do you know in the other year that went down, how did we do that? And if you want to get back to me, you know, in the weekly, that's fine too, if you don't know.
Are you talking about the drop in general fund reserves? Or
Expenditures.
I want to say I believe that's related to vacancies, but we can look into that as well.
Okay. Just want to figure out what we're doing right and keep doing it. Anybody else? No?
I do have a comment. The League of California Cities is in the process of establishing an insurance program. And it's specifically focused at health benefits and long-term retirement benefits that will reduce costs to the city. So I'm hoping that you guys, you're nodding your head, so, all right.
Anything from the committee?
No, we're just, you know, think these guys are doing a great job. Jason and Brett, I'm sure you play a very small part in our success.
Very small.
And, but it's, you know, good to see we balanced the budget here, and I think we've established a great process. Starting in February, you know, really come to a nice orderly decision-making process. I think that's very important. Because I remember my first year, we were throwing numbers around to the point I couldn't follow them anymore. I don't know if everybody else, but we threw something out that we just voted in the month before because the number fit. That was pretty much its requirement for leaving, so good job.
I just want to thank the council and thank the Budget Standing Committee. And thank Jason for all of his great work and the staff and coming up with a balanced budget. it was tough, but we got to this point. We feel really good about it at this point and looking into the future as well. So it's just, we really appreciate the work of the standing committee and the council's weighing into this whole process.
And the only thing I would add is that if you look at the fund balance, it's not growing. So we're doing it and we're maintaining. But, you know, luckily we've been able to contain costs. I think staff's done a great job. And they get really hard questions when we're obviously in the standing committee. And I think by the time it gets out here, it's definitely, and those questions, Dean, you're always open to ask. But I think, Jason, you've done a great job. Yeah, thanks.
I would, if I can, I would
Please.
echo the same. However, one thing concerns me, and that deals with the vehicles. We established several years back, particularly in relationship to the patrol vehicles, that we would be looking at 2 per year. We've done 2 this year. There's 7 scheduled for next year, and I realize not all of them are patrol vehicles. But a 4-year lease or 4 years' worth of operation means in 4 more years, we're going to be faced with 7 more vehicles if we're following that same concept. And so are we policy-wise changing what we're talking about as a council? Instead of 2 each year going along, we've already done 2 for this year.
So, Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, please.
So I'm probably the biggest critic of the policy to start with, so I'll say that. And you, at the very beginning when you said, hey, there's 7, but they're not all patrol cars, so they're not all on the aggressive 4-year depreciation schedule. I do think, too, we didn't stay on a cadence of 2 a year because when it got tough, we started cutting. So I think we are trying to make up and salvage. We've been also pressing on Tony a bunch of times. I know even in the ad hoc is show us the maintenance costs. I want to understand why is this so bad? So something that happens by the time they get through us, I think the allotment. I probably had more issue with the support cars than I did the patrol cars, which is kind of a flip for me. But then the patrol cars, I think, are probably the most important. And, a lot of the hardware and stuff that's in them and the outfitting and stuff like that, I just think that, and plus what's the first time in a long time, we're almost fully staffed police-wise to be able to have that capability. So, I don't know, yeah, knock on wood. But, I don't know, Dean, I mean, if you have specific questions, like I said, the policy, where I start with this, I listen to the recommendation, but I go back to the amortization, the list that Tony puts together of the 40 vehicles that we have, or however many. And I go one by one to see where's the depreciable life. And it's interesting because police we focus a lot on, but like Public Works, they got 14-year veteran cars out there. There's a lot of old stuff out there. So I think they're making the right choices. It always hasn't been the case. I know it's the same people, but I think it's a lot more sophisticated now. I don't know, Rich, if you had any
Yeah, 2
perspective.
things. One, this is definitely an area where it's easy to push, kick the can down the road, because a lot of times it doesn't have to be done. And I think in a year or 2, we're going to have 1 or no vehicle
Next year.
purchases next year.
Next year, and then none after that.
So it is going to be bad every 4 years, you're right. And if the cars keep wearing out as they are, but there's no real way to smooth it out. But I think if you look long-term, it pretty much works out to 2 a year. It just, this is the year we really bite the bullet. And like I think Troyce mentioned the last meeting, once you go the leasing route, you've kind of sold your soul to that, and you're going to be stuck, that every 4 years you have to do something. Even though we can buy the cars for $1, correct? So it's really a purchase agreement in a way.
It is.
And if we can stretch out a year or 2 after that, maybe we get a little more balanced.
I just was looking at how we're viewing it because it just seems like the same purchasing is going to be up in 4 years.
Yeah, and as it almost was a joke. Every year the police came and asked for 5 cars, and the council said, we can't afford any of them, we'll give you 2, we'll give you 3. And at least now we have a system in place, I think, where we're going to smooth that out at least.
And real quick, just because I looked at that as well, and, we knew we were going to have a year where it was going to kind of come to Jesus for the police department, because we've just been, they're good, And, you know, in 4 years, we've got these 7 cars, but like you said, they're not all patrol cars. So at those 4 years, the support cars probably could have a couple more years with the dollar lease. That's where we start evening out the 2 a year as a guideline, not necessarily a rule, but, I mean, now I think we've done the catch-up, we've gotten some cheap money, and we're good to go for a number of years.
You know, I think Tony deserves really some kudos here also for stretching these cars out. And Troy is very aggressive in our meetings about show me the costs, you know, is it worth the repairs, trying to balance that out. So I know you're stretching every dollar as much as you can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, anything else? No, see you at 6. Thank you.
Hey, Mayor, we could get them on horses.
A what?
We could